is like you want soreness, because soreness to a certain extent means you've worked hard enough that your muscles need some opportunity to repair themselves. And so much of adaptation, we think of adaptation as like we got to put work in, but so much of adaptation is also rest. And so what the fall does in a very short period of time, which is why the threshold and the interaction between pitching and strength and conditioning is so critical, is that you're in roughly maybe a 6 to 8 week maybe max, but a 6-week window-ish of applying this volume, applying this intensity, not just from a strength and conditioning standpoint, but from your pitching standpoint. And then, as we were talking about, every pitcher's going to throw, whereas maybe in the spring, you might be, relying on less arms because of, wins and losses mattering a little bit more. My brain went to your freshmen are stressed, right? They've just experienced this big life stress of moving to campus and getting adjusted. And then my brain also went to academic stress, because so many spring athletes will front load a schedule in the fall academically because they want a little bit more of space, obviously, to handle things in season. And so I just think like our stressors are through the roof in the fall, which to your point is not a bad thing. But our indicators of pain and soreness, especially if they do not recover within that 24 to 48 hour time period where we would expect things like delayed onset muscle soreness to cover if we are able to repair and prepare for the next bout of exercise. If those things then are leading athletes into chronic treatment in the athletic training room with their sports medicine staff, modifications in the weight room, they're missing time in bullpen, then our stressors, they've crossed the threshold, right? What we don't want are those stressors, to interfere with the ability to keep building. So you're always towing this line of, okay, we got to stretch. We got to be able to stretch that tolerance for adaptation, be able to be sore. It's going to happen in season. Sometimes look at the World Series. Sometimes you're playing 2 games in one game, right? In terms of extra innings, and that's going to happen. But what you're really trying to build adaptation for is how do you recover from that soreness? How does your body repair itself? How do your tissues repair itself? And so if you're constantly just always sore, the adaptation then is going to be maladaptive. You're going to find new compensations. You're going to end up in the AT room. You're going to end up injured. There's going to be a consequence to that at some point, whether it's just simply performance declines or, in worst case, it's injury. So you're towing that line all the time. So when soreness especially, and I think we sometimes separate pain and soreness maybe a little too much, but soreness is pain. And so if that pain and soreness is persisting more than the expected time of recovery for the intensity and volume that athlete did, we've got to keep an eye on that. That's just going to be cumulative, right? And I think the other thing that we sort of fall trap to, at least in my experience working with strength and conditioning coaches, is we know athletes are going to have a deload in the winter. It's going to happen. As much as we want to avoid it, every spring athlete is going to have some sort of a deload in the winter, just simply because of the nature of the time of year. So what we don't want to do is make the assumption that front loading all of our strength and conditioning stress, all of this work in the weight room, just sort of maybe modulate how much of a loss happens over the winter. That's tricky, right? What we want to be doing, just like in pitching, we don't want to build to peak right now. We want to build to peak maybe February 1st, when our tournaments are starting and we're a month-ish away of conference play. It's the same concept in strength and conditioning, but in the fall, we want strength and conditioning to be pushing that edge so that, and I think it's a beautiful point, so that we know what happens when her command goes, what happens when she's under fatigue mentally. It's not just, command goes yes or no, is what happens to her command. What are your indicators that fatigue is having an impact on her ability to create her ball flight? And so, yeah, we want strength and conditioning to push that threshold, to push that tolerance. But when recovery can't keep up with it and we have this excessive soreness, and it's impacting either the amount of time they're spending with their sports medicine staff or what they can and can't do in the weight room, or in worst case, what they can do in the bullpen, our threshold's gone too far. And it's about towing that line and allowing that rest recovery so that her system can adapt and continue to adapt when she gets into situations in the spring where she's going to be fatigued. It's going to happen. We know that regardless.